what goes on in California has a flow-on effect to the rest of the US, but it also has an effect to us. So whilst we have some Australian manufacture of rifles here, and they make some really nice rifles, and then you've got the Czechs and Austrians and a few others that make some particularly nice handguns. The thin end of the wedge to all of us, and I look at this a little bit selfishly, is that, in fact, if I think about it, just about everything in our safe comes out of the USA, except for Beretta. Our Beretta shotguns come out of Italy. If you guys lose the war on this, if you guys get the lawful, the Protection of Lawful Commerce Act, I just can't get the correct wording, but you know, the one that protects firearm manufacturers from sued for criminal misuse. You can still sue them for defective product, whatever, but for criminal misuse. If that ever gets up, and the Senate elections in Georgia right now or coming up could be the difference in that being repealed, that will have a flow-on effect to even us here in Australia. So manufacturers in the US, they'll be driven out of business. And, you know, the rest of the world probably couldn't survive on Lithgow rifles and CZ and Glock pistols and Beretta shotguns. So, you know, and then for your sake, you wouldn't be able to import them because those companies aren't going to set up in the US and import them either. So it would have a devastating effect on the entire industry around the world. And you can be sure that Biden, Harris, and that crazy guy out of Texas that wants to take all your, I don't want to mention his name, he doesn't need any airplay, that wants to take all your ARs and AKs, you know, you need to have a firewall between yourselves and those guys, because it wouldn't take much. You know, one lawsuit that they win, and you know, your insurance for a firearm manufacturer is going to be off the table, and then all the firearm manufacturers say, well, we're going to go and make paper clips instead.
It's fascinating, David, how familiar with, I'll be honest with you, I'm very unfamiliar with Australia's government and you know, the way you guys are set up, and I'm certainly unfamiliar with your laws. It's fascinating to me how familiar you are with American laws and civics. You know, that you've talked about the Second Amendment, that you've talked about you know, specific politicians. I think you know more about California gun laws than a lot of Californian gun owners. It's really fascinating. I honestly, it maybe sounds a little naive, but I didn't realize just how much of an effect it was worldwide. It feels like it's right here in my backyard. It doesn't. I didn't realize just how global it is.
We've got a few friends in the South, and one particular bunch of friends, we have this joke about the world news, and the world news is literally the US news. And, you know, we've been in a store somewhere and there's been a map of the USA, and I'll name her, Sonia. Sonia says, hey, look, there's a map of the world. You know, and it's very interesting that because the US has so much of everything, the American people tend not to look outside the US as much as, say, Australians who travel the rest of the world. And it takes a long time to get there. We're more aware of Europe and we're more aware of the US. So that could be partly responsible for that. But I think you can blame one of your fellow broadcasting entities, Tom Gresham, for my awareness. It's because we're interested, and those of us that are active in protecting the firearm industry and rights here in Australia, we all share information amongst ourselves, because really we do rely, it's a bit like Australia relies on, say, Singapore for fuel. I mean, we do some refining here, and we manufacture a lot of ammo. In fact, a lot of the powder that goes into your ammunition actually comes from Australia. You depend a lot on us for some of your, or for a fair chunk of your propellant. So we're a player, but we're not the big player. And The big player is the United States. So our interest in what goes on there and how it affects us is far more significant than, you know, if the powder supplier here, which is part of the Talus Group, Australian Defence Industries, and they supply powder to a lot of your big brand names in the US, particularly all the temperature stable product. If that disappeared, well, they'd be a bit desperate for a while, but they'd find other ways to solve that problem. Whereas if the US industry disappeared, we'd be in a lot of strife. I mean, no one's producing projectiles here that I'm aware of, apart from lead competition projectiles, certainly not hunting and pest elimination bullets like Sierra, Hornady, etc. So we're far more dependent on that, I think, and that's what drives us in the industry to be more cognizant of what's going on in the US and why what happens in the US matters not just to us, but to you, and that you guys need to learn a lesson of what not to do, which was allow laws. And California's a classic example. You know, you're almost as bad as us. You can't let that disease spread across the rest of the US. And I can tell you the likes of Bloomberg and Soros and co, Bloomberg's spending millions. He's spending money like you and I would buy a beer. You know, we go out for dinner and we buy a couple of beers. He puts a couple of $1 million down for an advertising campaign for a Senate seat somewhere. For him, it's nothing. I mean, the guy
it really is amazing how badly our side gets outspent. You know, we're constantly clamoring for money, and it seems like the other side, you know, just has, you know, endless deep pockets. It's really, really amazing.
Well, in the fight against that, and I'm going to make a plea to your viewers, and this is a challenge to everyone that's watching this, not just yourself, but all your shooting buddies. The upcoming Senate elections, there's 2 Senate seats in Georgia, and this is for all the marbles, right? This is for all the marbles. Those 2 seats in Georgia, if you live anywhere else, donate to Vote Red. It's votered.org, I think it is. Michael, you looked it up earlier when we were
talking about it. It's voteredamerica.org is the website you were referencing.
Yeah. So, or anyone that's doing some political activism with these upcoming elections in Georgia, you know, those 2 seats, if the Senate flips, they'll have the House, the Senate, and the presidency. You know, welcome to Australia is what I'm going to predict. Welcome to lawful commerce and arms laws being repealed. Welcome to all sorts of things. You know, so it is for all the marbles. And again, I'm going to be selfish. It's, you know, we're one of those marbles over here. You know, get behind getting the Republicans. You know, I don't care if you hate Republicans. I don't care if you hate Donald Trump. This is about your gun rights. Once you lose them, you'll just remember Australia. So if you're watching this and you're not doing something, if you're in Georgia, make sure you're doing something. If you're outside of Georgia, make sure you're donating. This is for all the marbles.
When for those listening, when David and I spoke before the interview, he said that the election in Georgia to him was the most important thing in the Second Amendment world right now. The most important thing in the Second Amendment world right now to an Australian who's fighting for the rights of gun owners is the Senate election in Georgia. I thought that was amazing. And
absolutely. It's
voteredamerica.org. You got that from Tom, you said? Is that?
Yeah, Tom. If any of your listeners also listen to Tom's program, he's been bashing on about that for about the last 6 weeks. Steve Scalise was on his program last week, and he was articulating how critical this is. And again, you know, I got to say to everybody, you need to do something or you're going to lose. You know, he was articulating very carefully how things would change if the Democrats get those 2 seats. Ultimately, Kamala Harris will have the final say, and you've only got to go to the Biden website and look at gun control and what it is that they're promising. It'll be coming to a state near you. So Georgia is the last line of defense. I mean, it'll be game over. It won't happen overnight, but it will happen. It'll be game over if those 2 seats go the wrong way.